Okay, Pop, now it's my turn.
Okay, come on.
It's always interesting when a game comes along that blends genres together that you don't usually see. Super Paper Mario had a mix of 2D platforming and RPG elements, and though it's not my favorite Paper Mario game, I think it was done pretty well. A more modern example would be Fury, which combines top-down, twin-stick, bullet hell action with precise hack, slash, and parry combat. This was done extremely well in my opinion, making Fury a huge recent favorite of mine. Today though, we're gonna head back to the NES era and check out a game that I've been wanting to try out ever since I heard about it. Pinball Quest. Pinball Quest. So this is Pinball Quest. The title screen ain't much, but just wait. We have a few modes to check out. The first one is Pop Pop, a pinball board that's bowling themed I guess. But there's a pool table on the side there, and it's all on top of a kinda American flag. There isn't a whole lot going on here, but if you hit all the bowling pins and land in the special hole, it'll send you to the pool table for a little mini game, so that's neat. Next is Viva Golf, a golfing themed pinball table, complete with gopher holes, water hazards, green grass, and hey look, the ball launcher is even a little golfer. Finally there's a circus themed board with a slot machine. Maybe it's Circus Circus in Las Vegas. There's a bonus mode here you can unlock where you capture circus animals with a bouncy ball. Ah yes, if you ever run into an angry lion, crocodile, or gorilla, simply throw a beach ball at them and they'll be defeated. Yeah, no problem. So anyway, that was Pinball Quest. Pretty short game, but you know, RPG mode. And here's the whole reason this game caught my attention in the first place. A pinball RPG? Are you kidding me? Let's do this. Oh yep, that's right. There's an RPG mode. So the story here is that the princess of a pinball kingdom is kidnapped by these trolls and taken away to some evil castle. It's kind of funny because the king and guards are all pinball people, but the princess is human. Maybe she's half pinball? Anyway, we play as the gallant pinball knight who sets off on his own to rescue the princess, using his trusty flippers. And that's where the game begins. From this point on, the game plays more or less like a standard pinball game, but with the progression of new screens and obstacles as we journey on. The first screen is pretty basic, just some trees and a couple of bumpers. The ghost of an ex-knight gives us some advice, but it's not really that helpful. Whoops, I hope he doesn't mind that we just destroyed his tombstone. Your goal here is simply to keep moving up until you reach the next area, each area having 2 screens to pass through. Every time you get to the upper screen, you have to manually move your flippers up, or else your ball will just fall back through to the lower screen. I think it's a bit weird that it doesn't just move your flippers automatically, or just have multiple flippers on the screen at once. I'll admit that I forget to swap their position half the time when changing screens, which loses some progress. Maybe they're trying to say that the player is the flippers and we're helping the knight on his journey, so we have to move with him. That's all fine, but there's something later in the game regarding this that isn't very consistent with this idea. We'll come back to that later. So anyway, each area has enemies and a sort of boss fight on the second screen that we must defeat in order to progress to the next area. In between areas there's the black market where we can spend our hard-earned points to obtain stoppers or flippers. The flippers are so damn expensive I don't think I ever managed to buy any, though they're supposed to make your hits stronger. Even then I'm pretty sure they're temporary. The stoppers, however, are extremely valuable. You can place them on the left, right, or bottom of the screen in order to help save your ball from draining to the previous area. The cheapest stoppers go away after a single hit. The more expensive ones stick around until you either beat the area or fall back to the preceding one. The most expensive stoppers are completely permanent, but once again they're so expensive it's unlikely you'll ever get to buy them. You can also attempt to steal, which if a success fills up your inventory with random stuff, but if you fail you'll lose half your points. Stealing is basically only worth trying if you don't have many points to begin with, though you can only hold 4 items at a time anyway, so be careful. It might just get you a bunch of the temporary stoppers. Falling down from a higher area is pretty annoying. As you fall, you're free to visit the in-between store, but you can't go back up to where you were, even if you can walk in this section. You must drop to the lower area, and even then you don't start off on the higher part of the screen, it drops you all the way down to the bottom. If you drain on the bottom of the screen of the lowest area, then the Ghost Knight says you failed and he asks if you want to try again, every single time. There's no life system or anything, he just decides to ask this for whatever reason. The game is pretty darn short with only 6 levels in total, which means it doesn't take very long to complete the RPG mode. Is what I would have said if this game wasn't hard as hell. Look, I'm the first to admit I'm not exactly the best at pinball, but I do enjoy it. I don't think I'm terrible, but man, this game really makes me feel like it. There just seems to be so many situations where dropping into the gutter is inevitable, especially with how the enemies move across the screen in unexpected ways. After some experimenting, I realized that the semi-permanent stoppers were mandatory for progressing. Those are the ones that stick around until you leave the area, but they're also somewhat affordable. So your best bet here is to just keep saving up points until you can buy these stoppers for the left, right, and bottom of the screen. Believe me, you're going to want them all. If you leave any spot open, you're sure to fall into it sooner rather than later. And even then, it's still possible to drop the ball, especially if you're not fast enough with swapping your flippers back to the bottom of the screen. Now that we know the ticket for winning, let's check out each area. The first one doesn't have a whole lot going on. There's some skeletons on the higher screen that form into a big one after being defeated. Destroy that and you get a key to move on to the next part. This is the entryway to the castle. The only surefire way to reach the top screen here is to land in this passage, which will launch you up to the top via the holes on the right. Sometimes though, it will inexplicably decide not to work. Once you've reached the top, you'll have to battle this troll witch and her army of cats. Not much strategy here except get the stoppers. The witch takes forever to die. Oh, and don't forget to move your flippers. Like I said earlier, the bumpers do not make you invincible, and if you fall back to the previous area, the boss gets a health refresh, so try not to do that. Next up is the green room. The bottom section has a couple of mood swing goblins that will either hurl your ball back down or actually help take it up to the higher screen. Once up there, you'll have to battle an army of statue goblins and their king. Even the game manual pokes fun at these guys. Some guards, these guys couldn't guard a piggy bank with a machine gun. They won't attack you or move to defend their king. They just stand there, wide-eyed and stupid looking. Jeez, give these guys a break. Same idea here as the last boss. Save up enough to get the stoppers and then use them. Damage the boss enough to beat them and that's it. At least you only have to beat each area's boss once, because you will be revisiting them a lot. After this, we're in a red area with deadly turtles. There's a little more pinball shenanigans going on here than the previous levels. Auto shoots from one hole to another, and even this wheel of luck that will either send you up or back down to where you came from. After that, we're put on a boat in order to reach the highest part of the screen. But some boats will sink and drop you back to the bottom of the level. The manual even has an explanation for this. Unfortunately, some of the boats are being rented out this weekend for the wedding of Beelzebub, Dark Lord of the Machine, so the owner of the boat rental agency has substituted a few second-hand tubs. Huh? Who the heck wrote this manual? Besides the additional random chance mechanics, nothing much is new here. Get the stoppers, beat the knights at the top, and move on. Next is the second to last area, and man, these screens have weird designs. There's a super narrow path to get from the bottom to the top end of the screen, which is really hard to get into. And then there's this long hallway that's just a bunch of bumpers that don't add anything interesting besides just making your ball take longer to get to where it's going. This is also the one area where there's more than 2 places for you to move your flippers around. There's 3 different spots to move on your left pair of flippers, and 2 for the pair on the right, which can make things even harder to keep track of. The boss here is also the most annoying one in the game. It's this evil harpy or succubus that takes 1,000,000 hits to beat. On top of that, when she's in human mode, she'll walk down to touch your flippers and actually inflict damage to you, which will cause your ball to drain to the bottom if you get hit only a few times. This is where you think the flipper moving mechanic would come in handy, but no. I tried moving the flippers away to avoid taking damage, but instead she just touches the spot where your flippers used to be and you still get hurt. I don't know if this was a glitch or intended, but it made this part a lot harder than it had to be, since you can now easily be sent back to the previous screen even without falling into one of the gutters. If you somehow manage to get past this part, you finally come up against the big boss himself, and it's Beelzebub, Dark Lord of the Machine. Okay, I thought that the text from earlier was a joke, but apparently not. We're actually fighting the devil now. He has a huge buster blade, but he never uses it, instead preferring to send skulls at us to deal damage like the last boss. But guess what? While every other area took me progressively more and more tries to complete, I actually managed to beat the final boss on my very first attempt. Which would normally be disappointing, but after that last boss I was more than happy. So we defeat Beazle and do a happy victory dance, but then we're sucked into a hole and we fall down onto a giant sentient magnet, but we hit the magnet which causes cracks to form everywhere, then it starts exploding. I have no idea what's going on here. Even the usually TMI manual has nothing to say about this part. So, Pinball Quest. I hate to say it, but I'm actually pretty disappointed with this one. I love the concept, I like the cutesy art style, but the execution just did not work for me here at all. I initially thought the game was going to be very short, but fun, and it ended up being kind of the opposite. There's not many levels, but they've made it so easy to drop your ball that it takes forever to progress through any of them. Even when making it up to the higher levels, it doesn't take much for you to fall back down to the very beginning and have to work your way back up all over again. It feels like these were design choices simply meant to artificially extend a really short game. The bosses take forever to beat, and worst of all, the pinball sections themselves just don't feel all that well designed. This is a video game, so they really could have took advantage of that and done all kinds of crazy stuff that wouldn't be possible in a regular pinball cabinet. Where's all the crazy loops and flashing lights and side areas? The screens here for the most part feel barren and boring, without much rhyme or reason for how they're structured. It could be that I'm just really bad at pinball, but everything felt off. Maybe if we had a little more control over our character, like if we had a little control over the momentum when he's flipping around. The extra pinball modes are a nice touch, but they don't feel particularly better in their designs. After playing stuff like Devil's Crush on the TurboGrafx or even Pinball on the NES, I'm afraid to say that this was a letdown overall. Well, I didn't quite get what I wanted out of this game, but I do appreciate them trying something innovative for its time. I still really like the idea of a pinball RPG game, and I'd love to see someone take a crack at it in modern times. I think a talented indie dev team could do something really great with this concept. Huh? Rollers of the Realm. Pinball game? Experience points? Enemies? How am I just finding out about this right now? I gotta try this out. Well anyway, as always, thank you guys for stopping by and watching my newest review, and I'll catch you next game. Hey everyone, my buddy Dragnix is doing a charity stream to raise money for the Zero Prostate Cancer Organization on December 12th. He'll be doing what he calls the Roguelite Rumble. 18 hours straight of streaming different roguelite games, attempting to beat as many as he can, and giving additional donations himself for each one he manages to complete. I've linked his Twitch page where you can see the stream and the organization he's raising money for in the description below. Please stop by and leave a donation if you can, or even just some supportive words in the chat to keep him going. I'll be there watching him myself, so feel free to say hi.